Hello and welcome to Heart's Home, the podcast. I'm your host, Lizzie Siegel, and I'm so grateful for your presence here. This podcast is all about exploring the beautiful synergy between science and spirituality, where we embrace both the woo and the wonder. In this space, we'll delve into the fascinating intersection of evidence-based science and profound spiritual insights. From solo episodes where I dive deep into concepts and practices, to inspiring conversations with other soul beings, thought leaders, and experts, and even guided breathwork journeys and meditations, and Reiki healing sessions to nourish your mind, body, and soul. This podcast is your go-to source for an holistic approach to wellness. Join me as we embark on a journey to explore how these seemingly different realms can come together to create a holistic understanding of ourselves, our world, and our place in the universe. Get ready to dive into intriguing conversations, uncover new perspectives, and unlock the potential of blending science and spirituality in our modern lives. Let's open our minds, bridge the gap between the rational and the mystical, align our energies, and embark on this empowering and enlightening adventure together. So, grab your favorite beverage, find a cozy spot, and be ready to level up on this transformational journey of self-discovery as you connect with your true self, remember who you are, and align with the divine within, returning to and embodying the essence of Heart's Home.
Okay, so hello and welcome to Heart's Home podcast. I'm Lizzie Siegel, and it's so amazing to have you on here, Alex. Please introduce yourself. I'd love to hear who you are, what you do, and yeah, just go for it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. So I go by Sober Yoga Girl is kind of my podcast title, my sort of thing in the world. And I'm actually, the reason why me and Lizzie have connected, which is really cool, is that I used to live in Kuwait, which is where Lizzie lives now. And I was a school teacher in Kuwait. I also taught in Abu Dhabi for a while. And now I run a full-time, my business has evolved so much since it began, but originally it was like a Zoom yoga community in the pandemic. And then I got really into sobriety Zoom programs, and I still do a lot of that now, but now I have like a physical yoga studio in Bali, and I basically run sober women's retreats and yoga teacher trainings here in Bali. So I do my own. I also work for a company here and do them for other people as well. Like when they bring sober groups to Bali, I teach on them. And then I also do them outside of Bali. So I'm going soon to Dubai to have one, and then Mexico. And so it's like a pretty wild life that's like very different from my Kuwait teacher days.
Wow, that is so incredible. Yeah, I'm just taking that all in. That's amazing, and congratulations. I mean, what a journey to hear what you must have experienced in all these years, and just you looking back, seeing how far you've come. That must be really an experience in and of itself. Thank you for sharing that. Ooh. Okay, so I love to, just before we get started on like the deeper questions, I love to know about people's zodiacs and if they follow any of the other types of like human design or enneagrams, all this kind of stuff. So if you know any of that about how you would be portrayed in the world, would you share that with me?
Yeah. So I'm Aries. I've known that always. So I'm born in April. And then the human design thing, it's funny that you bring that up because ever since I got to Ubud, have you been to Ubud before? Have you been to Bali? Have we talked about this? Yeah. So you get like the Ubud vibe, which is like everywhere you go, everyone's like, what's your birthday? What time were you born? Like all that type of thing. And so people kept asking me, what's your birthday? What time were you born? And I asked my mom and she didn't know. And then I hired a financial coach here in Bali who said to me, what time are you born? And I'm like, okay, now I need to know, Mom. I need you to get out the baby book because like I've actually paid for this coach. And so she does human design. And so I've learned that I'm a manifestor generator through human design. I don't know a lot about it, but I don't know my Enneagram. I'm sure I did at one point, but I don't know off the top of my head.
That's really fun to hear. Okay, awesome. And then like in terms of where you're from originally, we know now that you live in Bali, but where do you come from originally?
Yeah. So I grew up in Midtown Toronto, and I grew up there. That was where I was until I was 18 years old. And I then went to university outside of Toronto in an area called Kingston. It's like another city, much smaller than Toronto. But are you Canadian?
You went to Queens.
I went to Queens. Did you go to
I went
Queens?
to Queens.
Wait,
So
how old
fun.
are you? When did you graduate?
I'm 36. So
Okay.
I graduated I went to teachers college after, so I graduated in 2010. You?
Okay, so so I graduated in 2015. So you would have, like, I graduated high school in 2010. So you're in like the cohort above me. Wow. And where did you grow up? I didn't know you were Canadian.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Barrie, Ontario. I was born and
Okay.
raised there, yeah. And
Wow.
then I moved to Toronto when I was a young adult, and I went to York University
Oh my
that's not,
God.
first went to Queens. And
Okay.
then I wasn't really sure what I was doing with my life. And so I went back to Barrie, and they had a program there that was connected with York University.
Okay.
And so I went to York and finished my degree. And then I went down to the city to actually finish it because of the program I was doing.
That's so wild. Wow. My dad used to work at York.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, universe. Keep bringing this stuff in. More, please.
That's so cool. Yeah. Yeah. So I went to
Oh,
Queens.
amazing.
I did Queens Con Ed.
Mm-hmm. And you loved it?
It was good. It was challenging. Um, Queens was a tough place to be because people were so high achieving. You know, the Queens Con Ed program was so competitive. People were so high achieving. And then also there were a lot of like really privileged kids in my class that were like really, but again, that was also kind of my childhood. Like I grew up in a neighborhood like that, and I didn't realize how intense it was until a long time out. Because then I went straight to Kuwait, which I worked at a private school in Kuwait, so it was like kind of similar except like more extreme, like with like very wealthy people. And it's not until you get like so far out of it that you're like, wow, that's like a weird environment to be in. But yeah, Queens was amazing, but it was really hard on me, and it being hard on me brought me to find, you know, yoga, and had some pretty big drinking issues at Queens, which later, you know, led me to sobriety. So it was good and bad. Yeah.
Wow. And it was all part of the journey, honestly. I can hear that. Like, all of these
Totally.
things happened the way they did. And you saying this and reflecting this back to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so true. Like I grew up in like an area that was pretty affluent, and then, you know, my family's life changed, and then I ended up, my family and my parents split up, and so I ended up being homeless for a while with my mom and my sister. And our friends, alhamdulillah, they took us in. They were so loving and caring for us and supported us while we got back on our feet. And so I've seen kind of like both extremes of it. And then again, at Queens, I felt a very similar experience because I went there on scholarship, and it was super competitive, and it was very high achieving. And I tried my very best. And I was also really struggling to have support because I didn't really feel like I fit in or I belonged. And so that was like why I moved back home, and why I continued my degree elsewhere, because I needed that support, and I needed just a different environment. And yeah, I understand with Queens and the society that's there. It's beautiful, and it can be really, really challenging. So wow, amazing. It's so interesting to hear that like literally parallel lives are happening. And thank you.
Yeah.
It's amazing to connect like that. Oh, okay. So then you actually already touched on what I was going to ask you, how this like started to impact your holistic wellness journey. So can you tell me then more about your journey with yoga and how it intersected with your sobriety journey?
Yeah. So I actually started yoga when I was really young. For the first time, I was 10 years old, and I saw it in like a pamphlet at school, like yoga was being offered. And I said to my mom, like, can you sign me up? It was like this like innate calling. And then I did it again. So I did it yoga for kids when I was 10. And then I did it again when I was 13. I was like, Mom, I really want to keep going to yoga. So she brought me to an Iyengar yoga studio. And then I ended up signing up for their yoga for teens program as well when I was like 14. And then I dropped it for a little bit. So I did 3 different yoga programs like when I was really young. And then when I got into university, I started at Queen's, I started having pretty big mental health issues. When I got to Queen's, I think in high school, I was like a really high achieving kid. And I like got the trophy for like most involved or like whatever in high school. And then you get to Queens and like every single kid came out of their school with like that trophy, like it's like you're just like I was like another one of like every other kid. And it was really hard for me to find my space and get involved and feel important in that like society. And the place where I really felt relevant was in like the partying scene. And so that became like a huge part of my journey. And then I ended up started having my first like pretty big mental health issues in my second year. I mean, I had depression in first year, but in second year, that was when I remember things felt like weird in my brain. That was when I remember like experiencing like things more extreme than just like sadness. Like I was experiencing like tunnel vision, like walking through the campus. And the so interesting thing is that it's at the same time that like I was partying. I moved into this like house with really tough roommates. And then I like don't know how to cook any food. I get my first BlackBerry, like it's my first smartphone where like people are like pinged in all the time to like what everyone's going on. There was just so much happening. Anyway, at that time I found yoga, and yoga became my at this point honestly saved my life, because I was like doing therapy. I was like reaching out to my parents. I was like doing everything I could and nothing was helping. And then yoga was like the thing that helped. And so I started going every single day to yoga like that. Sometimes I would even go like twice a day. I was so addicted. And then I started working at the studio actually. So they offered me a job to clean the studio and then work at the front desk. And so that was really important to me because I would operate the front desk and people would come in. I learned all their names. I was part of community. People would always say to me, like, once I became a teacher there, they would be like, oh, you're like the best yoga teacher at knowing people's name. But it's like, because I worked reception. So I would like check people in all the time and see their names on the computer and blah, blah, blah. And so I just decided, I was like, I just want to be a yoga teacher. And my parents didn't want that for me at all. That was not what the type of career that people came out of, that area. Like they wanted you to be like a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, or something like that, and a yoga teacher was just like not the plan. And so I completed my concurrent education program, which, my parents had supported me in going through school. And so I felt like I had to like finish it. And then when I came out of Con Ed, I just wanted to teach yoga again. And my parents really wanted me to get a job. And so I was like, I'm not going to be a substitute teacher, because in Canada, you had to be a substitute teacher for like so long. I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, I don't care about this career enough to do that. And so I ended up seeing all my friends getting recruited for jobs. And that was how I ended up accepting this job in Kuwait. But Kuwait itself was very hard for me. It just wasn't the right fit, and so I ended up after Kuwait, I shared a reel about in Kuwait, I got married, get divorced, have this total mental health breakdown, go to Bali, start working in Abu Dhabi. I specifically moved to Abu Dhabi because I just wanted to be somewhere where alcohol was legal, which I like told everyone. Like,
Yeah.
I think I would follow it up with like, I know it makes me sound like I'm an alcoholic. I'm not alcohol. And then I stayed in Abu Dhabi for, it was a year and a half before I hit my rock bottom of like, I had to get sober. And when I got sober, yoga again was like the saving grace. I would go to the studio. Sometimes I remember I would do like double classes a night and just like heal and teach and cry. And it was shortly after sobriety that I met this psychic who was like, you're not supposed to be a teacher. You're supposed to be a healer. And that was it. Like, as soon as I met him, it was like boom, 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 like I'm flipping my life path. And as soon as you step into your purpose in that way, it all just kind of unfolds and arrives in front of you.
Mm.
So that's kind of the story. I can't even remember
Oh,
what the
so
question was,
good.
but
It was just like, how did yoga turn into your sobriety journey? And there it is. Amazing. There's so much of that I would love to, like, I could talk about bits and points in there for hours on end. And it's so interesting to me how, like, your experiences, I feel them with you. I'm there with you because I understand so many of them. There's definitely some that are not so resonating, but it's amazing how, even the part about like substituting, I was like, I am absolutely not doing that. I want a job right away. I will go wherever I need to go to like get a job and make sure I'm doing something. And yeah, it's so interesting how yoga, even that part you mentioned about when you were 10, the first time I did yoga, I was either 10 or 11. And I was the same thing. I was like at the YMCA or something. And I was like, Mom, I want to do that thing. She's like, okay. Because we used to go to different like clubs and things. There was like, I did an acting one. I did swimming, like synchronized swimming with my sister, and a yoga one. And I remember really liking the yoga. And at the time, my mom wasn't so into it because I was raised in a pretty Christian household. And so at that time, my mom was not as open as she is now. She's like a totally different person actually than when I was a child. And so back then it was like, well, that's kind of like a different religion, blah, blah, blah. But it was like, it never had anything to do with the religion for me. I understand now the components of yogic philosophy that are tied to religion. I so appreciate that. But it was more so about connecting with myself and like finding just this place where I found quiet. And I never had quiet in my mind. I was always one of those kids who had so much noise and thoughts and empathicness going on that it was a moment of quiet. And so I came back to it also in university and had those moments of quiet. I was like, oh, what is this? And then I lost it for a long time and circled back. So interesting just to hear that. Oh, I love this so much. I love talking to people and like just finding the similarities in life. Oh, connection. Okay, so then yoga is often associated with our mindfulness and our self-care, and it emphasizes our mind and body connection. How has this helped you develop your sense of self-care, your deeper sense of self-care along your journey to sobriety, as well as playing that role in your metamorphosis of your business, like in keeping yourself connected?
Yeah, that's such a good question. For me, it is like my most important self-care practice. And I think in this modern world we live in, like I'm so hooked into social media, and I have to be for, connecting with people, getting clients, building my membership. Like just before this podcast, I was like spending half an hour learning a TikTok dance to like put on my platform. And so as a result, that's my biggest struggle, is that I'm really addicted to that. And so my yoga practice for me is like this time to disconnect and unplug and remove myself from all of the distractions of the world around me. And it's really important for my mental health well-being. And so even when I'm not working, like I'm doing yoga all the time, teaching and like living yoga. But then when I have my time off, if I'm able to, I often will go into town and go to a yoga class. Like I just did 3 days of 3 yoga classes in a row, because for me, it's like this groundedness. And when I'm able to tap into that grounded energy, I can make, wiser decisions. I can be calmer in the face of, chaos and drama and challenge. And so for me, it's like a really necessary anchor.
And that's more so like the physical asanas and probably the meditation and breathing. And like,
yeah.
you obviously live a yogic lifestyle. I mean, I say obviously because I follow you, but to others. So what does that mean to you to live a yogic lifestyle?
I love that question. It's a great question. I love living with yoga philosophy at the front and center of my of my life, of my days. It's like something I teach a yoga sutra study class, and I'm so into just like nerding out and talking about like the intricate details of like each passage in that text, you know? And so for me, it changes the way I move through the world because I'm able to look at things from a different way than I would before. I'll give you an example. Like I had this accident a month or 5 weeks ago where I was hit by a car. And when I shared this story with people, you know, my family back home, the immediate response was around like legal action that I was going to take amongst these people that had hit me. And it's interesting because then someone else was telling me very recently who had come to visit Bali from the States, and they had taken legal action when they had broken an arm because it was like an accident, and, you know, they were suing whatever the person whose fault it was. And I was thinking a lot about how before yoga, I probably would have taken that stance too of like, I'm so angry at you. You've on purpose done this. You've been negligent and hit me, you know? And of course there are moments of like frustration around the whole accident, but I feel with yoga philosophy at my core, I'm able to come to like peace a lot quicker with the problems in my life, you know? And so I'm able to look at the situation and like see the people that hit me with like so much compassion and just be like, it was like just an accident, you know? And I could have had that accident too, thank God. But I've had moments of distracted driving where I haven't checked, and I could have like, thank God it's never happened, but like that could happen to anyone. And for me, taking like legal action on this thing just feels like useless because I know that we're all gonna come to a state, like I can come to a state of peace by letting this go a lot quicker than holding on and carrying it out. You know what I mean? And so I feel with yoga philosophy, I'm able to look at life with a much different lens than I ever did before. And it can help me make sense of everything that's going on in a much more like grounded way. I don't know if that answers the question.
Oh, absolutely. It's so, there's so many aspects of yoga that don't go untalked about, not at all. But like, if you're not a yogi and if you're not like really living in all of what yoga encompasses, maybe you just don't know, right? Like, so it's really great to hear those different experiences, because I think that when we actually start having those deeper conversations about what yoga is and what a yogic lifestyle is, that's when people like can hear more and start to have more things that resonate with them and maybe understand better. So thank you for answering that question.
I want to add one thing, by the way, which is like, I'm like definitely not perfect at it. And the guy that I'm dating is like so spiritual. Like when I met him, I was like, you are like so spiritual. But something I've noticed through our interactions is that at the end of every day, I usually have something that's annoyed me, you know, like that I'm telling him about. And it's been really interesting because I realized over time, I'm like, you don't ever really seem to like get annoyed. Like you don't express annoyance to me at the same amount that I do, which is like once a day, I'm like annoyed with one person in my life. And that's a really interesting reflection too. And I'm learning a lot about myself in terms of like, okay, where is that coming from? And I think I'm starting to see that it's like an inability. I think as women, we like were raised to like please people and not often say how we feel. And so me getting annoyed with people is often me not being able to express how I'm really feeling. And there's been some scenarios like I noticed that I can be passive aggressive in my yoga classes sometimes when I'm annoyed at someone, which is like crazy. Like I'm like, I hate this. And like the other day, I was getting so annoyed about this one situation. And then I finally communicated to someone how I felt. And it turns out that he had completely misunderstood. Like he thought I wanted this thing to be happening. And I was like, I don't want this thing at all. But because I hadn't told him, he had no idea. And so anyway, so I just say this to say, like, I still have like conflict. I still have like passive aggression. I'm definitely not perfect, but I'm like, because I live with yoga, again, that's another of the niyamas, it's self-reflection or self-study. And I'm learning so much. And I just keep getting quicker at like, okay, if I'm annoyed, I need to stop telling Kyle I'm annoyed at this person, Kyle's the guy I'm dating. I need to stop telling him and actually be like, okay, how can I resolve this issue so that I cannot be annoyed, which is like communicating how I'm feeling. So anyway, it's all yoga.
Oh, that echoes exactly what was happening in my life yesterday or the day before, or whatever, this week that was happening. And I live a yogic lifestyle as well as a Reiki inspired life. And so melding the two together is so beautiful. I mean, they're very like, they go hand in hand. So it's quite beautiful. My biggest reflection point is like when I start to get annoyed with people, or when I start to maybe talk not about people but like, you know, not be able, I guess it is talking about people, but not necessarily in that negative way, but just trying to resolve a problem or asking others for advice about how I should resolve a problem. Then I reflect on, what is this bringing up in me? And what is it showing in me really that I need to work on? And then how can I communicate that to myself? And then also, without having to ask other people for their validation and permission, how can I just go to the person that I'm having the issue with in the best possible way and talk it through? Or does it even need to be talked through? And is this really just a reflection of me? And can I just let it go? So that's what that is like my biggest tests and lessons and triggers from the universe that have been coming up in the last couple months.
And can I add one thing, which is that I'm also Reiki certified. and I do Reiki. And so when you said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's just like so many parallels.
So many parallels. We are living parallel lives. It is happening. Yeah, Reiki was really yoga was my first saving grace, and then Reiki just absolutely helped me find my healing. So yeah, you had mentioned earlier, I don't know if I was recording properly then or not, but that you were sick. And so can I just like digress and talk about that for a minute? Because I'm curious. That Reiki and yoga was the reason that I had like this breakdown, which leads to breakthroughs. I always believe that a breakdown leads to a breakthrough, and I had a big one, and it was being sick, and I made myself sick. And Reiki and yoga really helped me to start healing. So can I just ask, if it's personal, we can save it for another time?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually the whole time that I lived in Kuwait, I was extremely unwell, but it was never like a specific it wasn't like a specific illness. It was like I just kept going to the doctor with like infections, problems. At one point I had this cyst that got infected in my neck. They thought I had a birth defect. I like had to have surgery. So there was like this ongoing like just like general sicknesses the whole time I was in Kuwait, which I find so interesting. But then at the very end of my time there, I was like going into like I was just having pretty serious mental health problems. I was like later diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I basically wasn't like, I couldn't sleep very well. I couldn't eat at all. My hair was like turning gray. And I was having these like panic attacks. I would wake up in the middle of the night with a panic attack, which is so interesting because it shows how like uncontrollable it was to me. Like it wasn't like I couldn't sleep because I would wake up just in so much pain basically. And all of these manifestations meant we were talking right before the podcast started about, or maybe I was talking about it during the show, I can't remember, but how I got this job opportunity to teach yoga full time in Kuwait. And it was right after I married my ex, and I couldn't hold space for a class. I couldn't hold space for students either, but I don't want to say like I didn't care, but like, you know, I was just like, whatever. But a day could pass in the classroom and I could not tell you one thing that happened. Like I could not tell you what went on that day. I couldn't tell you what the conflicts were. I couldn't tell you anything. And then, but I really noticed it in the yoga studio, because I think you can kind of get away with sleepwalking through life in other realms, in other places. There's a lot of people who like sleepwalk through life a little bit, but because, you know, as yoga students and teachers, we're so tuned into our energy that when I stepped into a yoga studio, I couldn't do it. I tried. And I mean, I think I don't think anyone complained, but I felt it within me, like this isn't working, you know? And, so I had a complete mental health breakdown. By the very end of my time in Kuwait, I was like planning my suicide. I like was planning to jump off a building. And then I got back to Canada, and it's so interesting to me, the whole thing, because they just basically said to me, like, you have this illness, take this medication. And that was like the plan. I mean, I think they gave me some social worker sessions, which were nice, but I look back on the whole thing, and you know, the trauma that I endured there, which I ended up writing a book about, you know, just the struggles of my time there. Of course, it would be natural that someone who's been through all that stuff and not had any support over 2 years would come to this point of like a breakdown. And I just think it's so fascinating how our Western medical model doesn't see it as such. Like we're not able to see. And I mean, true, they also had no environmental context. None of the doctors had been there. Like they didn't know like what I was coming from, you know? And so they really had no idea, but I now see it as like the individual is not flawed. It's the world that it's the environment that we're in that quite often can lead to or perpetuate so many of these issues.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting, because we can really have like different experiences depending on wherever we are. Like I've had some absolutely fantastic experiences here. Of course, this is why I've stayed so long. It could be a lot of ways. It just depends on the person and the experiences they're going through.
So it's like your environment within your environment. And, you know, you can have a tough time in Bali, you can have a tough time in like Canada. And it's like all the combination of things that is happening for you, your home, your work life, the people. And the supports that I had were non-existent. And I was just so young and really needed support when I didn't have it.
Yeah, that's a really important point to mention. Like it is the environments within the environments within the environments. It's not necessarily the place. It's just how you are. And we can be different. Like at different points, I've been so different here. And it's, I really understand, because of the position I'm in, that it's all just part of the awakening process. And like before I was sleepwalking and like I was, and that's fine because that was that part of my journey. And now it's just very different. And so to have these like really conscious conversations and to understand that like this is just part of the journey is really enlightening and nice and great to hear that perspective can be shared. So thank you. Back to what you're doing. I want to know more about this. So you run your brand Sober Girl Yoga. And there are so many people who are struggling with addiction, or maybe not even struggling with addiction, but just struggling with like trying to find themselves and trying to get connected with themselves, or looking for their purpose in life, which is like the work that I do, is helping people find their purpose. And like, what kind of alternative tools for recovery would you describe that yoga can provide? And like, what are the benefits of incorporating yoga into their practice or into their life in order to help them with their struggling or their suffering?
Yeah. So for me, yoga just became a natural, like it just worked for me. I didn't know why. I didn't understand the science behind it. I just did it. And I was part of a recovery program that was based in the UK. It was run by these two men, one who I'm still quite connected with. He's awesome. And the main component of that recovery program was like, do a physical challenge. They were like, you know, it was like 28 days, 90 days, or 365. And they were like, do a physical challenge. And so everyone was like running marathons in my sobriety group. And that was like what they were doing to help, you know, keep their focus off drinking, keep them busy, accountable. And, you know, at the end of their 100 days sober, they ran a marathon or something. I'm like not a runner. Yet I felt like I needed to like do a 10K, like walk a 10K, even though like I had no interest in doing it at all. And meanwhile, I had, you know, done another bar instructor training, done another yoga teacher training, become a certified life coach, all in these 100 days. Yet I didn't seem to think that any of that was equating to like the challenge that like everyone else was doing. And I found that so interesting, because then when I later ended up developing Sober Girls Yoga, it became clear to me of like, okay, when I was in recovery from my mental health, like way back at university, I did a 30-day yoga challenge. And that was what, you know, it was that commitment. It was like, I'm going to go every single day. That changed my life. And so I was like, I'm going to like put something together for sobriety. And so it's a Sober Girls Yoga 30-day challenge is what I offer. And there's many reasons why yoga goes hand in hand. The first is like that accountability. It's like having a meeting that you show up for every day. Like in AA, it's 90 meetings in 90 days. And so having your yoga class every single day is like, number one, you're accountable, you have a commitment. And this yoga practice is not only going to be your accountability and your commitment, but it's also going to help you with your physical health. It's going to help you with your mental health. It's going to help connect you to community. It's going to regulate your nervous system. It's going to like infuse your sobriety with spirituality. It basically ticks like all the boxes of like what you need when you're in recovery. And so alongside that, and so I'll just tell you a bit about my program. So I basically have a sobriety program. That's how I first got into sober work. And, it's evolved so much, but it's a 30, 60, 108-day challenge. And the women also get a workbook with daily, writings, reflections. It moves through the chakras and then later yoga philosophy. And then we meet once a week and do like a sober women's circle. And so basically, I think that it's like all the pieces in holistic healing that one would need when they're giving up alcohol. And oftentimes, you're going to find when you go on this journey, you're going to start to uncover things and realize like, actually, it's like not about the alcohol. It's like mostly me just trying to cover up this other thing that I'm starting to uncover when I get sober, whether it's like, I'm not happy in this marriage. I've been, hiding my sexuality. I don't like my job. Like there's probably something deeper. And so it ends up really not being about the alcohol at all. Like alcohol is the thing, but once we peel it back, it's just like a deep dive into like, okay, what is really needing to shift in my life for me to be happier and not need to go back to drinking. And so that's it. And that's the significance that I think it plays. And I've been doing this work now for, I think, so I just hit 4 years sober. I've been doing this stuff for about 3 years. And it's just amazing to see the number of people whose lives have transformed. And I'm at a point now where a lot of the original people, we got really bonded and connected in the pandemic and we were super tight on Zoom and the world has evolved. Pandemic has lifted. I'm doing retreats and yoga teacher trainings. The community is not what it once was. But the beauty in that is that I'm seeing this let go, which is honestly beautiful because it means, okay, I've made myself redundant because they've become so strong in their sobriety that they can like fly without me. And the things that some of my, original community members are doing now, from starting their own businesses, working in studios, it's just amazing. And so it's cool to see that transformation and be part of that transformation in people's lives.
Wow, it's really incredible. And yeah, congratulations on 4 years sober. That's fantastic. Oh, what a long time. What a good celebration. What a nice thing to be proud of. And that I love hearing that, like, we do make ourselves redundant as coaches, as teachers. Like that's always the job, really. Yeah, I think back to even my students, like my hope in my job is that like, you don't need me, that I teach you the skills and tools that you need so that you go on to the next part. Like you can lean on me for support, of course, but like, I don't want you to need me. I want you to learn everything that you can and then fly. And I think that's like really what true love is anyway, and that unconditional support. So when you bring that back to the yoga sense also, it just resonates so deeply. So now tell me about like the transition from teaching in a school, wherever you were, Abu Dhabi, I understand was the last place that you were in, to opening the yoga studio in Bali. This is a huge change. And you mentioned that like you went home and you had some healthcare and some support. How did you get from wherever you were to opening a studio in Bali?
Yes. So I was, okay. So I left Kuwait, went back to Canada, was doing some healthcare, ended up coming to Bali for a yoga teacher training in the summer of 2017. And, I just fell in love with it. Like I knew, this is where I want to live. I just love it here. And so I ended up going back to Abu Dhabi because at this point I was like, I don't think that I, could make it as a yoga teacher. I don't know how to start a business. I don't have the resources to start anything. And I ended up taking a teaching job in Abu Dhabi. And so when I got sober, which was in April of 2019, I met this psychic who said to me, you're meant to be a healer. You're going to have a retreat center one day. And that was like the starting point for me. And so I started really going hard into, getting qualifications, getting educated, figuring out my purpose. There were so many different steps along the way. It took me so long to kind of figure things out. And I ended up just kind of falling into sobriety work, not on purpose. So I was like writing about my sobriety in my sobriety group, got, connected to a lot of people, got a bit of like a following or community there, and then started my online platform in the pandemic. And that's when things really took off for me. So things just were building and building. My classes on Zoom were packed. Like at the beginning, I think I had like 70 people in one class in April of 2020. Yeah, which was just like amazing. And at the very beginning, I was just kind of doing yoga on Zoom and a little bit of yoga philosophy, whatever. And then as time went on, as the pandemic lifted, as circumstances changed, I realized that this idea of yoga was just, I just can't speak to everyone, or I'm going to speak to no one. And I realized that people were really drawn to me for my sobriety. And so that was when I started sobriety work. So I was purely just doing this online thing for a long time. And then I built up the online thing enough to quit my teaching job. And a big part of that has been doing yoga teacher trainings, which is becoming more and more my passion and focus. And so I educate yoga teachers. I think I've had like 100 people graduate from online stuff. And now I'm doing my first one in person next month, which I'm just so excited about here in Bali. And so, so I was doing that. And then when I quit my teaching job, I actually wanted to stay in Abu Dhabi just because of the way the world was. Like, Bali was still kind of in lockdown, it was quarantine. I was like, I don't think I can really go there. And then after a short period of time in Abu Dhabi, I realized, probably like my life here is really expensive for like a starting entrepreneur. I could go somewhere and do this like a lot cheaper. Okay, I guess I need to go to Bali. And this was like October of 2021. And so I came here. It was really hard at first because quarantine was happening. I didn't really have the same community or reputation or anything in Bali. And I felt really alone. And so I was doing that. I was just doing the online thing for a long time. And then everything kind of fell into place. Like I opened up a company here and I was just using it to run retreats and yoga teacher trainings. And I wasn't even planning on having my own physical space or studio at all. This wasn't in the plan. And then I just like happened upon one, as you do on like Facebook, like a yoga shala for lease basically. And so I moved in here and now I run classes out of the space and I run retreats and yoga teacher trainings. And it's all kind of like the universe has just like brought it all into place. It sometimes doesn't feel like it's real, like because it's weird how this stuff just becomes normal. And it was such a far off dream once upon a time. And now it's just my life. Like I live above my yoga studio and I have this like beautiful view of the rice fields. It's magical. It really is.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good to hear this as like a person who's in those beginning stages where you once were, and just to hear that. So I told you at the beginning, thank you for this expansion. It's huge. Like you don't even know I could cry right now. I feel like, yeah, you mentioned that's magical. Like for me, this is magical. Having this kind of conversation, that's magical because to see what's possible, to see and to know and to trust that like really our manifestations are always happening. One moment after the next. I manifested getting here to Kuwait to have this job. I remember in university, quick digression as I do, I read in a magazine during one of our classes. It was a magazine, I think, and it was this teacher talking to their student about an exchange, because there was a point in my university degree where we could go on an exchange to a First Nation, Métis, or Inuit setting, because that was what my program was focused on. And I really wanted to do that because I loved traveling. As a child, I got to travel a lot. And so I read in this magazine that the teacher was talking to the student and she was like, oh, if I get to go to Italy on that exchange. And the teacher was like, no, when you get to go to Italy on that exchange. And just that simple word chain, I adopted that then and there. And it has the when versus the if has changed my life. And the adding yet to the end of a sentence has changed my life. So like, I can't do this yet. Like, these little teeny words, the way we talk, our words are magic. Like, it matters so much, and it's not the only thing that matters. It's not like I can just say things and then it actually happens. You have to take those inspired bits of steps along the way and the right action, and that goes back to even yoga and having the right actions and the right judgment and the right discernment. And so I just think about all these pieces that literally come together, that, and I go, I manifested this. Like, that is for me just huge. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Thank you. I do have a couple more questions for you. So Bali, it's known for its vibrant yoga, like everything. I've been to Bali a couple of times myself, and I absolutely love it. I think it's a phenomenal place. So you mentioned that when you went there, it felt like home. Did you explore other places? Were other places ever on your radar, or was it just like, no, Bali is it, and this is where I'm going to go?
These are great questions. I love them. I can tell how much thought you put into them. You know what? Yes and no. So I was able to do a lot of traveling in like my time in the Middle East, and I did a bit of traveling when I was younger. And I actually have this like 3-part divide between these like 3 places in particular. But Bali has always been like the magnet of like, this is home, this is home. But there's 2 other close seconds, which really were close seconds just because of their proximity to other parts that are my homes. So Bali just felt really, really far, and it is very far. And Sri Lanka was my other one. I visited Sri Lanka when I was living in Kuwait. I loved it. And then Costa Rica is my North America, and Sri Lanka is my Middle East, and then Bali was always like, I have to go to Bali. Like, it felt like there was a reason for this to be this chapter of my life. I don't know if I'm going to be here forever. So my dream is to have retreat centers in a few different places, and they would probably be like, I definitely see there's some Costa Rica attraction, but for right now, for the first spot, for the place where I felt like this chapter of my life needed to unfold, it was definitely Bali.
Oh, I knew you were going to say Costa Rica. So I'm claircognizant, and there's just some things that like pop into me that I was like, she's going to say Costa Rica is one of them. And I love that because it is really close to our North American home, and that makes like perfect sense. Oh, and when you say that you have like different places that call you as home, my home that calls me is Thailand, and particularly Koh Phangan. That one, and this is literally what my podcast is named after. It's what my program is named after, but it's not Koh Phangan that it's named after. It's that feeling that I have when I'm there. My heart is home, and it's the home of my heart. So like the meaning of heart's home with the apostrophe S, I'm an English nerd. It's the home of the heart, and where the heart is home. And so it works both ways. And so I 100% understand how you are when you're saying this about finding that place that just calls you. And of course, you make it whatever you want to make it, and whatever it's meant to be. And that's so beautiful. And I love and I support your vision of having these centers around the world. Also really weird, earlier in the conversation, I had that feeling that that's something you want to do. And so just all the weird things are happening in my brain and my body right now, and I'm just grateful for that. Yeah, it is so cool. Okay, so then just a little bit more of, can you say, when transitioning from your stable job of teaching to an entrepreneurship and how it can be so challenging, what advice do you have for others who are considering making this similar transition? So whether it's like to a physical place or to an online space, or pursuing their passions, it could be for yoga and wellness or just in general. What advice do you have, or what is like your biggest lesson that you could share?
Yeah. So my biggest challenge, and I think this is like most people's biggest challenge, is the financial things of it is like, I want to do this thing. That's my dream, but I also need like an income, and I need, I need to be making money to support myself. And that was my biggest struggle, was like the finances. And it still honestly is, because I get better and better as time goes on, better and better, but I could get myself into like panic spirals of like, the money is not coming, it's not coming enough. And then the funny thing is that it turns so quickly. Like it turns so quickly, like I can be like, oh, it was like less than a week ago when I was talking to my financial coach being like, I'm not making enough money for this and that. And then like, 2 more people signed up for my yoga teacher training the next day. And so it's like, but that's the hardest thing for me. And I got some really good advice from my boss when I was teaching. I told him that I wanted to leave teaching and just do yoga full time. And he said to me, he was like, I ran a business in my 20s. It was really hard. Don't leave here until you're making more money than you were teaching. When you can make that equivalent income and you feel confident about it, then you can leave. And that really helped me, because it was kind of a ballpark point of like, okay, I have to grow my business enough so that I'm making this much so that I can support myself. And it meant that I was working under really high pressure for a while, because on my own timelines of like, I just want to get out of teaching. And so, but it forced me to make really big moves, like launch the yoga teacher training, because I was like my business, I think, was running at a stable, like between $1,000 to $2,000 a month was what I was making for a long time. But then I was spending all of it on like the systems and the staff and whatever. I wasn't really profiting for a long time, until I was like, okay, I need to flip this on its head, because this membership is not working. I'm working 24/7. I'm making no money. Teacher trainings, like bringing in a program that actually is going to sustain me. And so I think, if you really, really want it, then you have to be able to think creatively, and also don't be afraid of failures, because I've had so many failures along the way, and every single failure has given me information about what I am meant to be doing, what I'm not meant to be doing. Like, for example, I love how every single thing has been tracked on social media, because I got these Facebook memories, like on this date 3 years ago, you posted this. And I love looking at them, because I'm like, wow, I was trying to launch this thing, completely failed. Like this time last year, I was trying to launch this sober girls yoga tour where I was like going to visit all these states and do events. Failed. I got like one random person booked in like all these random states, but like, that's just an example of like, okay, this was like not the time for that thing. Or, 3 years ago, I was trying to do yoga for kids on Zoom, completely failed. And so then I'm like, okay, I'm not a kids yoga teacher, and so it's just finding, trying new things, finding out what works, and also what works in one season of your life might not work at all. Like there was this one point in time when I had like 7 sobriety groups, like women in initial sobriety, and I was running all these things. It wasn't even that long ago. It was like between 6 to 10 months ago. I was fully jam-packed with this stuff. And now I'm struggling to get a group together for initial sobriety, but I just graduated like 5 groups from one of my yoga teacher trainings. And so it's like different seasons of my life seem to be working for different things. And I just need to like release, the pressure that I have around certain things.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you. That's such good advice. And I think to anybody who's listening, like whatever endeavor they're on, that is such good advice. And it's so interesting, because I take a lot of training for myself. I have coaches. I have like a business coach. I'm getting certified with my breathwork and meditation on Friday, actually. Like an extension of the, yoga teacher training, but it's different. It's in a different capacity. And so like, I understand, like all these groups that I'm in and all these things have been talking about like the seasons and the giving space for stuff. And that's really highlighted in our world right now, that like not everything always happens at the same time and in the same way, just as our seasons change. And it's such an important reminder to us to go with the flow and to surrender, to be able to have that trust that of course everything's always working out for our highest good. So like to just go with it and try out new things. And also keep trying, because it's just a challenge. It's not necessarily a failure. It's another challenge that you're learning how to navigate through. And so you already told me my last question was about your future plans and aspirations. You were mentioning that to open up yoga retreats in different places around the world. Do you have any other aspirations though that you wanted to like add to this?
Yoga retreat centers are the big long term. I have a book that I think I mentioned I wrote in 2020, and that this is the year where I want it to get published. And I was trying to get publishers, I was trying to connect with agents. Now I've just decided like I'm going to be self-publishing it, and so that I would like to be moving forward with. And I also would really like to do a TED Talk at some point.
Ooh, that is so funny. That's something that's always been on my radar, to do a TED Talk. I think they're amazing. And so I love that you mentioned that. Like TED Talks really can share with the world so many things because so many people get to see them. And wow, I am cheering on you on in all these areas, and I will be forever, and I'll be watching your successes with them. And I also have a publisher that maybe I can connect you to, even if you're going to do it yourself. So I will connect you. I love that. That's what this whole world's about, is connecting each other. Okay, so just to finish off with a couple fun questions. Can you tell me what is one book that has greatly influenced your life in holistic wellness? Yeah.
I always say the same one. I'm always like, man, I need to get commissions on this. It's Meditations from the Mat by Rolf Gates. Changed my life. Do you know who Rolf Gates is?
I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Oh, get this book. It will change your life. And so I picked it up off the shelf back in that first yoga studio I worked in. And he's also in recovery. He's sober. He's had the most incredible, inspiring life. And I actually got to meet him and do yoga teacher training with him. And now I can call him a friend. He's been on my podcast and been a guest in my sober weeks. And so he's awesome. So highly recommend it.
Meditations on the mat?
From the mat.
From the mat. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I will definitely be getting that as soon as I can. And then what is your favorite way to connect with nature and nurture your relationship with the environment?
Oh, that's a great question. God, my house is like a connection with nature. I love it. I love being in it and just looking out over the rice fields. Living here, I feel so connected. But also, I used to do a daily walk every single morning when I got up. And that was like one of my favorite ways to start the day. I've kind of fallen out of that because I wasn't walking for a while with I injured my ankle in this accident I had. But I'm back in action. And I think that would be a good daily ritual.
I love that. Oof, yes, walking is so powerful. I miss having a good nature to walk in. This is hence all these plants around me. I bring the nature inside. And then finish this sentence. Holistic wellness means?
Holistic wellness means caring for I'm yawning as I answer this. Caring for your body, your mind, your soul in a variety of ways, not being afraid to try things that feel out of the ordinary, and being brave and choosing what will I'm going big with my big answer. Choosing the things that will be in your highest good as often as you can.
That is so good. I love that part. Thank you for adding that. Wow. Is there anything else that you want to share with us? What are you up to? How can people find and connect with you? How can we support you and what you're doing in your mission?
Yeah, this was such a fun podcast interview. So how can you find me? I'm most often on Instagram. Alex McRobert is my account that I'm most often on. And the Mindful Life Practice is like the main hub for my business, where you can find everything from my podcast, Sober Yoga Girl podcast. I have a magazine, Sober Girls Yoga Magazine, where I highlight like sober stories around the world. And if you are ever in Bali, the Mindful Life Practice Bali is the name of my studio. I run classes here regularly. And teacher trainings, sobriety work, and yoga.
Amazing. And it will all be linked in the show notes. So if people want to find you, they'll absolutely be able to find you and know what you're up to. So thank you. And truly, I feel like I'm talking to you, but I feel like I've known you forever. I feel like just this is easy, this is loving, this is just so natural to me, and I'm just so grateful to be able to connect with you, but also like know that somehow the souls are already connected. So it's a remembering, really. And that. So thank you for your time and your energy and your honesty and openness to share all of this beauty with the world. And thank you for what you do in the world, because it is so important that we ditch the behaviors and the self-sabotage and stop masking what truly wants to come out and what is for our highest good and the good of all beings. So I greatly appreciate what you do. And I know there's so many other people in the world who will resonate with that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Lizzie. It's been so awesome getting to know you and see so many synchronicities in our journeys and our stories. And I'm just so excited to see where it takes you next.
Thank you. Well, you will be seeing it. We'll be keeping in touch. Thank you.
And that concludes another episode of Heart's Home. I hope you enjoyed this episode and feel inspired to take action in your own life. And if you're not already following me, and even if you are, it would be great to stay connected. You're invited to follow me on Instagram at Namaste Plant-Based, and even follow the podcast's new account at heart.s.home, or email me at namasteplantbased@gmail.com and say hey. I always love to hear where listeners are from, what you are up to, and get to know you more. You can also find me on YouTube at Namaste Plant-Based, where you can like, subscribe, and share my videos to help spread the word about my mission to live and help you live a joy-filled life and to savor each moment, living for the here and now, showing you that life's meant to be this awe-inspiring gift. That's why it's called the present. I aim to sprinkle and share positive vibes as I explore this amazing and beautiful world and this awesome human experience, reflecting on and growing through the journey of life, connecting and uplifting others through sciences and spirituality, and the practices and principles of yoga and Reiki. It is my hope to share and connect with other soul beings in this lifetime, encouraging you to connect with your own personal wisdom, healing abilities, inner divinity, and expansive potential. If any part of this episode resonated with you, I would love to hear about it. Take a screenshot of the timestamp of the part that really spoke to you and share it on any of your socials, tagging me at Namaste Plant-Based and the podcast at heart.s.home. Or drop it into my DMs and let's start a conversation. I'm always eager to connect with listeners and learn from your experiences, your insights, and your feedback. So don't be shy. Share your thoughts with me. This is an entirely independently run podcast, which means that every bit of outreach, every bit of feedback, and every bit of support makes a huge difference in supporting me to produce high-quality episodes for my community. And if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on YouTube, and leave Heart's Home a rating and review on podcast platforms. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me to continue to create empowering and enlightening content for this community. And if you're listening on podcast platforms, please leave a rating and review. It really does help me to reach more listeners and become more visible through the searches. If you feel called, you can even reach out to me for working with me on the creation of future episodes of this podcast. Or maybe you even consider making a donation to help me cover the costs of production. All ways and avenues of encouragement and support are so gratefully and graciously accepted. Thank you in advance. Also, if you're interested in taking your journey to the next level, I offer one-to-one breathwork, meditation, and Reiki healing sessions, distant and close by, private coaching containers, and group programs. My upcoming Hearts Home 2.0 group program starts in September, and the waitlist opens soon, so stay tuned for that. I also have holistic wellness and Reiki retreats on the horizon. And for those who prefer to learn and grow from the comfort of their own home, most of my offers are online. So you've made it to the right place. If you're ready to take the next step of your holistic wellness journey, you're invited to connect with me by sending me an email or a DM. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me on this transformational adventure. I can't wait to see you in the next episode. From my heart to yours, namaste and peace out.